Mistake I did when growing broccoli. I accidentally let it grow a little bit too long and it started going to flower. Ideally, you want the heads to be nice and tight, similar to what you see at the grocery store, but life got ahead of me and I missed my window of opportunity. When you're cutting, make sure to cut at an angle because your plant's eventually going to form side shoots and you want it to stay healthy. I only missed the ideal harvest time by a couple of days, but that's okay. We will still enjoy this broccoli and I can't wait to try it. Don't make the same mistake I did when growing.
Garden tips from a green witch. Have you tried to grow broccoli before and always wound up with tiny little heads, or they kind of stretch out and go to flower before you have a chance to get them good size and you're wondering why? Well, let me show you the easiest way to get broccoli looking a bit more like this. Broccoli does not like to be growing in the hot summer, especially as it's nearing the end of its life cycle and putting off your flower heads, which is what you're growing your broccoli for. If you want to get nice, densely packed, big heads like this on your broccoli, then you want to time it so that they are starting to come to flower head at the time when the temperatures are starting to drop. This is going to slow down the growing process of your broccoli and allow those heads to get nice and big before they start to bolt. Broccoli are very heavy feeders, so you're going to want to make sure that you have a good amount of nitrogen in whatever soil that you're planting them in. Nice thing about brassicas or cold crops like broccoli and cauliflower and cabbages is they're very forgiving growing them this time of year. So even if your math is wrong or you get an early frost, you don't have to worry about these guys. They can handle the frost. They can even handle a bit of a freeze. They'll even grow under the snow and still produce a bountiful harvest for you. Great side effect of growing them this time of year is that the cold triggers a response in the plants to produce more sugar to help feed them and keep them alive in the cooler temperatures, which means your broccoli is going to be much sweeter. So if you want those picture perfect heads of broccoli that taste divine, grow them at the end of your season. Garden tip.
Hey, where'd you get your...
This is my top tip for maximising your broccoli harvest. After you've picked the main head, do not pull out the plant, and this is why. A few weeks after harvesting your main broccoli, your plant will start to produce side shoots, and these will all have miniature broccoli heads on them. The entire broccoli plant is edible, so you can eat the leaves on the shoots as well, and new broccoli can form at every axil between the stem and the leaf, all over your plant. Every time you harvest a new bit of broccoli, more shoots will appear. In fact, your broccoli can continue to produce side shoots for months and will give you more broccoli like this than the original head that you harvested. This is my top tip.
Here are 3 tips to get the most out of your broccoli harvest, and it starts with the seedling. Tip number 1 is do not allow your broccoli transplants to get root bound. If they sit and age too long in their pots, as soon as you transplant them out, they will bolt and then you'll be sad. Tip number 2, once you remove the main head, do not remove the plant because it will produce an abundance of delicious side shoots. You'll get even more broccoli than you originally had. And the final tip, if you're growing broccolini, you actually want to remove that top early on because that'll force it to produce an abundance of side shoots, which is what broccolini really does. Here are 3 tips. The perfect time to harvest your broccoli. Technically, there's no wrong time, but there is an ideal time. For example, you could harvest this, but it's a little bit small, so you're leaving a lot of broccoli on the table. Ideally, you want it to be at least the size of your fist. And you want the head to be nice and tight, so this one's already starting to loosen up, and it's definitely ready to harvest. Here's an example of one that's loose and slightly past its prime. Another sign is that the florets are starting to separate, and the flowers are starting to open. So let's harvest this, but don't remove the plant quite yet. That's because each leaf node will produce its own little floret. And given enough time, that one plant will now turn into so many florets, you won't even know what to do with all your broccoli. And that's how you get the most out of your broccoli in the garden. The perfect time to...
One of the biggest mistakes that I see beginner gardeners make is not knowing exactly when to harvest that broccoli head. Let me show you. It really is an art to it. You want to wait and watch until the very last moment, but if you wait too long, it might get spoiled. Here's my lovely broccoli plant with a solid head on here, and what we're looking for is nice tight buds that haven't opened up yet. So these will actually turn into little yellow flowers if we let it keep going. But we don't want it to keep going, we want to eat this. So this is perfect, this is what we're looking for. I'll show you how to harvest it. You can use a knife to just cut it at the base, but I prefer to just pop it off. Done. Now you can see this one's not quite ready yet. All those buds haven't fully formed yet. Let me know in the comments if you're growing broccoli this year, and of course follow my account if you want to see more tips.
Broccoli. New gardeners, let's talk about broccoli. I might get some hate for this. But I want you all to be successful, so I want to tell you what you're getting into. I've seen a lot of people commenting, can you put together a bed that has broccoli? Because your family eats broccoli. Confession time, broccoli is really hard for me to grow. And I've been gardening for 11 years. It's not a beginner plant. Now, if you live in a cool climate, then awesome. It probably will do great for you. But if you live in a hot climate, I don't know. When you look at a broccoli, the head of the broccoli is all little flowers. Those little flowers are trying to go to seed. What happens is if they get too hot, they open up, and now it's not that beautiful head of broccoli that you're expecting. But if you insist on growing it, let me tell you a few things. Broccoli takes up at least 1 plant per square foot, and you need to dedicate about 5 months of your garden to this broccoli. You're going to start your seeds inside 4 to 6 weeks before your last frost date, and you're able to plant them outside 2 weeks before your last frost date. Broccoli is also a heavy feeder, so you're going to need to prepare to fertilize it. And if you don't have a lot of growing space and you insist on growing broccoli, I would suggest you utilize the space under the broccoli to plant things like your lettuce. You also can plant beets and spinach and arugula. Also, I would look into planting it for your fall garden versus your spring garden. Why, Rachel? Because the pests are really bad in the spring. That little white butterfly that you see floating around is not your friend. It's the cabbage white moth. They're also prone to getting aphids. Best thing to do for the moth is to keep your broccoli covered with a net. And for the aphids, use some soapy water or neem oil. Let's talk about how many you need to plant. According to the family garden plan, if you want to put enough broccoli away for an entire year, you need to plant 3 to 5 plants per person. That's a lot of space. My suggestion would be to use your fall garden to plant that when everything else is kind of dying out. So start those seeds inside 50 to 60 days before your first frost. And broccoli hates anything over 80 degrees, so once your temperatures have dropped below 80 degrees on a regular basis, then you can plant them outside. They like rich, moist soil and sun. The other thing I would say is research the varieties that you're buying. Some are a little more heat tolerant than others. And look at the days to maturity. Some mature faster than others. And I did grow broccoli last fall, and I got a couple of heads of broccoli, enough for a couple meals, but not enough for an entire year. And yes, I know it is possible to grow broccoli, and you'll probably see some suggestions in the comment, which is fine. This has just been my experience and the information that I've researched. So like and follow for more content like this and much more.
And how many times have I seen this happen where someone buys a head of broccoli, they decapitate it, they use this part, and then where does this go? Yes, in the trash. This is perfectly edible. This is food. So what do you do with your broccoli stem? Well, these little twiggy bits, I would just cut these up and cook them along with those. This can be a little bit tough, and that's because it's got skin. You can actually see the skin on it up close. See that? So what do? You take your knife or you take a peeler and you take off that skin just like that, and just the skin, don't go too deep. This is what I call filet of broccoli heart. It's super tender and crunchy and delicious, and you can cut it up and dip it in your hummus and eat it raw, or you could shred it or slice it and make yourself a little broccoli stem salad. Don't waste it, use it. Also, you know what's really fun? You cut this up into little sticks. You put it out on your crudité platter. You know what a crudité is, right? Like raw vegetables. And a dip, you put this on your crudité, and then you play a game with your guests, which is, what is that vegetable? Nobody knows. And how fun is that? Because then you feel superior and smart. That's really what it's all about, right? So there you go. And how many times have I seen this happen?